And I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. For some of us, it's a cold January evening. Hopefully for others of us, it's warmer. Welcome to Mid-Career Conversations, Becoming an Executive, featuring storyteller Christa Dickenson. My name is Zeynep Güler-Tak, and I'll be hosting tonight's conversation. So we'll be spending some time together. Now, as this event, as we know, is virtual, many of the events we're attending these days are, we're not gathered in the same space. And I do recognize the following land acknowledgement might not be for the territory you're currently on. If this is the case, please take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. The website that we like to use is, and we'll put it in the chat, is native-land.ca. And this is a really good resource. As a member of the York University community, I recognize many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. The territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. The Mid-Career Conversation Series, what's this all about? Well, it was created with alumni like you in mind. Alumni who have really they have several years of work experience in your respective fields. You're now considering a pivot, or you've already actually made a change, a transition in your career. Tonight's really about coming together as fellow York alumni to share our stories and experiences with each other, guided by an alumni storyteller who will share their own. This is not a how-to or step-by-step guide. It's really someone's real-life account, their story, with a couple of tips sprinkled in here and there. So I am really glad to be volunteering my time to be tonight's host. So I'll give you a little bit of background about who I am. I'm also a fellow York alumni. I received my BA what seems like a long time ago in 2002. For some visual cues for those who need them, I have Middle Eastern background, and that heritage gives me my olive skin and my dark features. For the past 20 years, to give you a sense of kind of where I've been, storytelling's really always been my focus and kind of the compass for my career. I've worked across the media, PR, tech, and travel sectors, engaging global audiences and producing multi-platform content, really, that with collaborators like Microsoft News, Time Out, NBC, Business Insider, and Lonely Planet, to name a few. I've had the opportunity to create content that has really raised awareness, has raised over $1 million in funds for girls in STEM, for COVID-19 relief, for racial justice, and across climate action as well. Today, I get to work in the social innovation and impact space where we are breaking down barriers for underrepresented communities in tech. Now, to give you a sense of what to expect from tonight, our storyteller will give about a 15-minute talk. Then we'll take some questions from yourselves, the audience. And as always, we expect all comments to be relevant and respectful. Now, here is something I'd like you to do. Feel free to use the chat and enter in where you're tuning in from, which city, which province, which country. That way we can get a sense of where everyone is kind of tuning in. Oh, we have Victoria, BC. Hi, Victoria. Toronto, Tottenham, Burlington, Montreal, Richmond Hill, New Hampshire, USA. Nice. Hello. Whitby, Moncton, Etobicoke. Woo, California. I knew there was someone out there in the sunny California. Oh, Vancouver. Hey, Calgary, Mississauga. Look at this. We're all over the place. That's awesome. Okay. So as I said, after the Q and keep it coming, after the Q&A, we'll stop recording and move into the breakout rooms, which is kind of the good stuff where we get the networking portion of our night. And that'll last about 20 minutes, and then we'll return for our final remarks. So we'll kind of reunite for that and maybe share some ideas and thoughts. To get started, we encourage you to have your video on. It is so nice to see you and for our storyteller to see you. But we do entirely know that this is a very busy time of night for some of you. So if you need to keep it off, we totally understand. And as per Zoom etiquette, please mute yourselves. Normally we would say you're on mute, please turn it off. But in this case, please, if you can mute yourselves, it just helps us with the background noise. And finally, consider, like myself, editing your screen. So the way that my name is under my screen, you can edit it similar to mine, where you have your first name, last name, your pronouns, and then your year, the faculty and your year. That way we kind of are like, oh yes, we are part of the same community. And then you can just do this by clicking on the rename section in the Zoom menu. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our storyteller for tonight's conversation. I'm very, very excited for Executive Director and CEO of Telefilm Canada, Christa Dickenson, MFA 93. Christa also sits on the Dean's Advisory Committee for the School of Arts, Media, Performance, and Dance. Hi, Christa.
Zainab, it is so nice to be here.
Welcome, welcome. So we appreciate that Christa has taken the time to join us to share her story and perspectives about becoming an executive. All right, welcome, Christa, and take it away.
All right, shukran, thank you, merci Zainab, and a very warm welcome to all tuning in tonight for the Mid-Career Conversation series put on by my alma mater, York University. Now, for those tuning in who may be visually impaired, I am a white cisgendered woman in my early 50s with shoulder-length, naturally gray hair, and today I chose to wear a bright orange jacket. I have to say, I'm so humbled and honored to be here tonight. And I must tell you that I'm also so excited to speak with York University alumni in their mid-career, because I'm lucky at this time in my life where I think I have some lessons that are worth imparting. York has been so good to me, and I wish to tell you that many York alumni from the School of the Arts, Media, Performance, and Design are active, successful members of the film industry today. And I know so in part because I see them come through the pipeline at Telefilm where I am. And I'm talking emerging creators, coming through our program Talent to Watch, to documentaries, to higher end feature film budgets. So I'm going to gather my thoughts for the next 15 minutes in 3 categories. First, how did I get here? And then I'm going to look at imparting some advice on what I think makes a great leader. And thirdly, I'd like to share some very practical, concrete tips, the ones that Zainab mentioned. So let's dive into it. University. I have 2 film degrees, culminating with my MFA from York, an amazing program and phenomenal training ground. Really, really equipped me to turn into the documentary filmmaker that launched my career. And from there, I quite naturally went into news at CTV News. And for those of you who are closer to my age, you might remember a show called Canada AM. It was the big morning show nationally. So that's where I started my career. And I worked in various production roles there for about 2 or 3 years. And quite quickly, I was like, yeah, I want to move up a little bit. And I realized that moving up at CTV meant being a news writer for 10 years. And I didn't want to do that. So I did a move, and I did something a bit risky. I left the cachet of CTV to move over to CPAC, which is the Cable Public Affairs channel. From there, I did things that were important to me. I got an election underneath my belt. I rebranded the channel. And then an opportunity came that I jumped on, which I was recruited to start up an internal production company at Rogers. Now, this was the mid-late 90s. We're talking an era in broadcast TV where there was this shift from analog to digital and opening up to hundreds of channels in the universe, quite different from today's streaming universe. So at Rogers, I spent 15 years and in 3 distinct areas of the business, starting in TV, then moving to telecom, and then wireless. More on that later. What I realized after that, at that point, is I'd gone too far from where I started. And I said, what do I want to do next? And I really want to try my hand at not-for-profit. But I knew I was missing some credentials. So to do that leap, I took a course at Institute Corporate Directors of Canada on board governance, and I successfully transitioned at the helm of Interactive Ontario into the not-for-profit sector. So it's a trade association advocating for the digital media sector, makes perfect sense, goes back to my media background. And it really afforded me that opportunity to grow as a CEO. And I took on the revitalization of the national organization sharing it. And that was very, very intentional because it gave me exposure in Ottawa, because I was already thinking about my next big step. And you guessed it, public sector, to head up a Crown agency, which led me to where I am today as the CEO of Telefilm. Now, why Telefilm? Yes, I could do the job. I've got the skill set, all that, and the expertise. But for me, which really, really mattered more than anything else, and why I chose Telefilm, is because of its values, its core Canadian values, and what running a Crown agency represents. So that's my resume in a nutshell. And I think that, I've often asked, what was that turning point moment when you realized that you would want to become a CEO one day? And I think the turning point came early for me when I was a teenager. I was about 15 years old and in high school. My Spanish teacher was also a debating coach at school. So she, in Spanish class, to get us to practice our oral verbal skills, she'd get us to debate just as an exercise. Anyway, one weekend out of the blue, the home phone rings. We had home phones then. And she called me to ask if I'd be a last-minute substitute because a pair of debaters of hers in her club at a tournament was sick. So I said, sure. She just knew I was bilingual and she'd seen me in the Spanish class. Well, to everyone's surprise, we went on that pair to win the debate. So then they asked me if I would participate again. I'm like, sure. So I went to the city debates. We won that. We went to the provincials. We won that. So all that to say that I learned the first valuable lesson to becoming a good leader. Along with confidence and believing in myself, it was my abilities to help carry a team to its goal. But truly the moral of this story for me, it was to say yes to an opportunity. And that's a recurring theme for me. So let me switch over to the second portion of what I want to chat with you about, which was imparting advice on what makes a great leader. You look around and you're like, you get inspired. A leader who really, really marked me was John Tory. Now, most of you on this call recognize him as the mayor. For me, he was back in the day the CEO of Rogers, and he was empathetic and authentic. And how I saw that is he put together a program called Walk a Mile in My Shoes. And every employee, in order to get their bonus, that was the incentive, would have to go and shadow another employee totally in a different area of the business. So for him, for instance, he went on a truck roll, so those red vans, and he went into a customer's home. He saw the pain point, he saw the difficulty the technician was facing, he saw, what the client was facing, and he really worked at customer satisfaction, which back in the day was a big deal. So he looked at the health and well-being of staff, and I took this lesson to heart. You have to be your best self. And you need your staff to be happy and healthy in order to do the work, because that brings the best and healthy industry. And that has been absolutely key to my leadership today at Telefilm. So in 2020, January 2020, my husband's in news. I met him at CTV. He told me, Christa, there's this virus that's going on. I think you should start traveling less. And I brought it to my executive team and I said, you know what? Do we have a business continuity plan? What happens if this virus goes pandemic? So believe it or not, in January, February, we put together a SWAT team. And it sounds so silly, but we ordered 200 cardboard boxes. So cardboard boxes saved the day, believe it or not, for us. You would never think so. So what it was is that in 2020, most of our staff was PC based, believe it or not. So to get people home safely, well equipped and able to do their jobs was about that. So imagine that. PCs and cardboard boxes, it was about leaning into the weakness, turning it into a strength. The staff felt safe, they felt confident. It was so important because on a dime, they were turning around and delivering for the audiovisual industry $173 million of emergency funding, and they're perfectly equipped and willing and wanting to do it. And yes, we've updated the equipment. Everybody has laptops now. So vulnerability is incredibly important. And I've got some other stories, but I think I'm gonna move over to practical tips because I'm looking at the time. I love some of these stories. So let me tell you, you're in your mid-career. You probably are a subject matter expert, whatever that is. So a few things you must do. You must build up your business acumen and demonstrate it. So rapid fire and executive needs budgeting. You need to be able to read a balance sheet and understand it. So I arrived at Telefilm, put through a zero-based budgeting exercise immediately. Strategic planning. Embrace it, stick to it. That is the secret. Only 10% of businesses stick to their strategic plan. Guess which ones are successful? Those who stick to the strat plan. And that means road mapping, it means KPIs. And then risk management. Familiarize yourself with a risk register, risk appetite heat map. At Telefilm, I put in place a very sophisticated risk management process and introduced the complexity of the business due to it, a PMO, which is a project management officer. And that truly is an ace up my sleeve. Now, human resources, once upon a time it was considered soft skills and maybe a bit of lesser value than other functional abilities. Wrong. Today, it is a golden era of HR. You have to understand the HR levers and KPIs. And my last little rapid fire advice before I get into some other strategies is get board experience. Why? Because it's a good glimpse at the actual role of the CEO and their executives as they present to boards regularly. You'll learn a lot. So there was one overriding characteristic that has led to my career trajectory and success is that I take risks. And maybe you've heard it when I was describing my career at the beginning. I've taken unconventional steps. So I'm not looking to redo what someone else has done. I don't follow other people's footsteps. I lead. And you know what? Yes, I'm driven and I'm absolutely unapologetic about it because I do it thoughtfully. Now, I remember that feeling in my mid-career of being stuck. And it was really, really hard because, I remember having a really bad day. And I was in the car driving the kids, and Hugo, who was, like about 6 or 8 at the time, I turned around and snapped at him in the back seat. And I said, Mommy's having a really bad day. Just be quiet. And he said, you know what, Mom? Every day's a bad day for you. That's when I realized something had to go. The only one who controls your career is you. That is my lesson. Find the opportunities, create them, seize them, and understand that your skill set is transposable. So I told you my career at Rogers, I would get back to it, how I went from TV to telecom to wireless. I was running productions, and I went to rolling out a major brand telecom internationally. Why? It's the same skill set. You're just not press and record. Once I realized that and I embraced that opportunity, it was a phenomenal change in my career. So really, it's about finding success in surprising places. Very much like when I chose to leave CTV to go to CPAC. All my friends, they thought I was nuts. So to do all this, you also need to know what is your differentiator. And as you go through and mature through your career, realize your differentiator will change as well. Now, I've hinted at them right at the beginning when I start to talk and during my speech so far. Language skills has been one of my differentiators. I used to lean in on it. Now I just take it for granted because I live in a multilingual, public sector environment where everybody's speaking multiple languages. My differentiator now is the fact that I've actually worked in private, not-for-profit, and public sector, which is very rare. And I want to use York University as an example. I can think of two phenomenal differentiators as a university. Their values, which is why I love York so much. Their raison d'etre right now is the power to make things right. They are serious about positive change. Look at their United Nations Institute for Training and Research. It's a first of its kind. And then think of their different campuses, making them accessible to a greater diversity of students and faculty. They have one in Markham, the Glendon's College is bilingual, and then there's the Costa Rica with the Las Nubes Eco Campus. And then a few more things before I hand it back to Zainab is, be interested in learning and continuing your education, and not in a traditional sense, but, seek outside counsel, seek advice, get involved. I've sat on a peer advisory group of CEOs for a decade now, and I won't miss one of those meetings. Look at mentorship, coach. I seek more counseling now than ever. So it seems counterintuitive, but the more you're looking to raise in your career, the more coaching you need. And also think about giving back. I executive coached pro bono a couple EDs in the charitable sector, and it was very rewarding. Trade associations, it's a great way to get involved, to network, and realize how important that is, because your next job will not come from your immediate circle. And lastly, I want to say that I surround myself by other fabulous executives that support me, people that are not necessarily like-minded, experts that speak to my blind spots. So at the end of the day, what I have to say is my resume really does not matter. What matters is what I did with it. Zainab, over to you.
How could I follow that, Christa? Thank you so much for sharing. I have so many questions. However, I really appreciate that. Was so impactful, so much to dig into. I would love to kick off with a question that I'm really excited to hear about. I've been telling stories in TV, radio. We have I was a Rogers. I started my career at Rogers. Come on.
Come on.
Right. I know how fulfilling yet how challenging it can be to be in the space and tell stories in the audiovisual media. So I would love to hear, and I know a lot of people probably share this, what are some of the specific challenges, but also some of the maybe specific opportunities in the Canadian audiovisual industry that you can share with us?
Okay, where to begin? That said, a challenge is an opportunity. So if I had to pinpoint one prominent challenge, And a goal that collectively, I think as an industry we are working on is having more representation within the film and television industry. And that is absolutely necessary work. So at Telefilm, right now in January 2022, as we open up for the massive intake in our production program, the data that we are now going to be collecting on a volunteer basis covers so much more than what it did. We're talking indigenous identity, racial and ethnic identity, gender identity and expression, belonging to as LGBTQIA plus community, disability status, and belonging to an official language minority community. This new expanded data collection, in my mind, it's an absolute game changer. Why? It's because we'll have an accurate portrait of Canada's film and television industry to see who's coming, who's within it, and more importantly, who's not. Therefore, so that we can try and adapt our sets, adapt our programming, our funding. I truly believe that we're going to look back in a decade and see this as one of the most significant moments that drove positive change and growth.
Christa, thank you. I want to bring that to, I absolutely agree. We've been living off of the US and their stats for way too long. So I appreciate it's so a long time coming, I'm sure, and so much work that's going into that. You had me at strategy during your conversation. So what I'd love to know is when you're strategizing your career, right? So this part of your career, because you've had separate strategies and you wanted to pivot into nonprofit, into public sector. How do you assess if a new role or organization is right for you?
Wow. Okay. If there's one question I think I ask myself when I look at an organization is, does it align with my values? Would you drop everything to say yes and take on that challenge and responsibility? So for me, it's very much related to core values, transformation. Clearly, you see that I'm excited about that. And bringing an organization to the next level, it's optimal capability. And for me, I do like brands. So currently that Canada brand is important to me, for instance. And so, that's why I hopped at the opportunity to lead Telefilm Canada and to help make a mark in the creation, promotion of Canadian storytelling, because that's my roots, as well as cultural diplomacy landscape.
All right, that was so, I once again, I have way more follow-up questions, but I will keep those for later. I'm going to take a question from you. I really don't like to say people's names before they tell me how their friends and family pronounce it, but I'm going to try you, Ting Chu. And how do you, I really like this question because in the professional environment, specifically for women, I do find that this does happen still. So I'd love to hear your take on it. Is how do you deal with being gaslighted or undermined by subordinates or colleagues or superiors in a professional environment? How have you been able to kind of navigate that?
I don't dwell on the negative. And yes, unfortunate incidents happen. At the end of the day, it's really about building up those trusted advisors and trying to drown out the noise. There is going to be noise. There's always going to be noise. You cannot make everybody happy. Just keep your eye on the ball. What matters?
All right. And okay, so let's time travel. We're going to go to the past and we're going to say, what was the one thing you wish you told your younger self as you were growing in your career? So what do you wish someone told you during your career as you were
I was naive when I was young. I'd like to think I'm a little less now. I wish someone had said, you really cannot have it all at the same time, that you have to make choices, that there are trade-offs, and truthfully to be at peace with that. That comment about Hugo, my son, in the back of the car, I clearly wasn't at peace. And I think that you probably figured out from what I said at the beginning. I've lived abroad. And one of my favorite sayings comes from an ancient Egyptian proverb that I learned when I lived in Egypt. Seek peacefully, you will find.
When I lived in Egypt, once again, prompting more questions in my mind. Krista, you're full of these.
I told you we're going to have coffee. Remember?
We need a follow-up, Krista. Everyone needs to hear what's going on, all the other things. I think a common question, and you have addressed it, I think it's taking that leap and not getting pigeonholed. So Rohit Hajela is saying, how do you get over the syndrome of you're subject matter expert, you're best suited for this current role. And I feel like some of us do get pigeonholed or feel like we need to do the best in this area and we can't move, but you have pivoted. I myself have found the courage to pivot, but tell us more about like, how do you get through that? How do you navigate that and really carve that path for yourself?
So part of it is to see yourself, believe it, visualize it, and do a plan. Literally give yourself a roadmap. It's an assignment. And tell yourself, I'm going to carve out X amount of time. For instance, getting to the Telefilm road, believe it or not, was a long journey, more or less 6 months from, first interview to appointment, whatever. And, but I literally carved out 1 day a week on preparing myself, meeting people, getting them to talk to people, interviewing, researching. It takes a lot of work and you need to do it. And so if you're in marketing and you want to move into sales, you're going to have to start talking to people outside of marketing. Otherwise, you're only going to always be in marketing. So you got to start, and you'd be surprised, people are always willing to help you. And when you reach out networking, always ask 3 things. If there's 3 things, can you introduce me to one person? Is there something that you think I should participate in? Is there something I should read?
Oh, Krista, I think we almost addressed Catherine McGee's question here with that one.
Okay,
yeah, it's like you're clairvoyant. You knew that this was coming. I think yes, I've had this exact question. I'm going to read the whole thing, but we can kind of cut it up into pieces. How do you branch into a different field that you have little or no experience in? And I think Krista did touch upon that. Networking is 100% a great way to start that, baby steps. How do you get an employer to take a chance on you when you have little to no experience, but you wish to leverage your qualifications experience in another area? And that, I feel like that's a transferable skills question, but Krista, I'm going to let you kind of field that.
It is a transferable skills question. It's also making sure that, if there's 100 resumes on a pile, what is it going to make sure that you're on the top of the pile? So first of all, use LinkedIn and figure out who's connected to the recruiter or someone within that organization. Place calls, like you absolutely, it's 100% necessary. I had an old colleague of mine who's like, I applied to 10 different jobs today. Well, you're not going to get any of them because you haven't put the amount of work to land the one you need. Figure out also, is it possible? And go after that.
That's it. And it also comes down to, and you did mention this before, is really strategizing. And once you do that roadmap, you have to work backwards, right? You have to figure out, this is where I want to be. And then you reverse engineer that roadmap and see where you need to go today.
Yeah.
And I think that's a tremendous lesson that, because you can go anywhere. You can, right? I said I wanted to work I was working in marketing and I wanted to work in media. Once you put that in your head and say, I'd be great at this, then you start reverse engineering. What are the little steps you can take every day to get there, right? And I think that's a tremendous kind of way to look at it.
Before I forget, there's something else that comes to mind that I should have mentioned, is also know who your audience is. It's not who the recruiter is, but who's the hiring person and what are their pet subjects. Like, for instance, for me, it is all about corporate social responsibility. So, that's going to really tug at my heart if you're a person in news and the news story you're going to highlight is something that is one of my interests. Maybe the person that you be reporting into is an avid skier. Talk to them about it.
Right.
It's know their interests, get to know them. Everybody has passion points.
Hint, hint, storytellers always write for their audience.
Always.
That's number one protagonist is the audience, right? We'll see if we have time for one more question. Christa, do you got it in you to have one more question? Yeah. All right. Okay, so every day is a bad day. Oh my God, that one, I felt that deep in my core as well. I've had the same thing directed at me. As a new mother who is okay, so this is from Elizabeth Burks. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably. As a new mother who's just stepped into an executive role, about how can I ensure I keep my work and home life separate? I'm stepping into an executive role for the first time. Congratulations, in the hybrid and remote work environment, which probably is unprecedented, of course, for so many. I think this will be an ongoing challenge. So any advice you can provide?
100%. I love the question. And first of all, Elizabeth, congratulations. It's a big deal. Set boundaries and also tell your family what you need. For the first 6 months is going to be tough. That be realistic about it, and you should have an EA. I hope you have assistance or some sort of help. Make sure that they're a gatekeeper and give and empower them, and also make sure that you do empower that person to say no. This is Elizabeth's availabilities, and you've got to stick to it.
Thank you. All right, everyone, those are amazing questions. I really appreciate the engagement. We're going to move into, this concludes the Q&A portion. We're going to move into the networking portion of our evening. And so in a few minutes, I think a minute or two, you will be prompted to join a breakout room with about 3 or 4 other alumni. Our icebreaker questions will show up on your screen. If you want to read them aloud, it can help everyone, and you can choose them, or you can just let the conversation direct you and just network away. You'll have 20 minutes to connect, and then we'll be invited back to the main room to kind of share and buzz and have some final remarks. And then after those final remarks, we're going to stick around. Some of us are going to stick around, and you can continue the conversation, exchange contacts once the event is over. And the networking portion will not be recorded. So I just wanted to let you know. And yes, so here we go.